Introduction: Become the person before the fortune. The smile before the lesson. We all have a highly specific, heavily romanticized vision of our future wealthy self. When we imagine this person, we assume they are fundamentally different from who we are today. Our future wealthy self wakes up effortlessly at 5 a.m., drinks a perfectly blended green smoothie without making a face, and loves reading dense articles about municipal bonds. They never buy a $7 coffee out of boredom. They never stare at an online shopping cart at midnight trying to fill an emotional void with a decorative throw pillow. Meanwhile, our present self is hitting the snooze button for the third time, eating leftover pizza for breakfast, and actively avoiding opening the mobile banking app because ignorance feels remarkably similar to peace. We operate under a massive, global delusion. We believe that acquiring a large sum of money will magically perform a personality transplant. We think fortune will cause transformation. But as anyone who has ever studied human behavior will tell you, the exact opposite is true. The transformation must precede the fortune. If you are waiting for $1 million to make you disciplined, calm, and financially responsible, you will be waiting forever. Money does not change your habits, it merely funds them. The Formula One Paradox. Imagine handing the keys to a multi-million-dollar Formula One racing car to someone who has never driven anything faster than a rusted golf cart. They don't understand the brakes. They don't know how to handle the torque. Their nervous system is entirely unequipped for velocity. Would handing them that car instantly turn them into a world-class racing champion? Or would it simply create the world's most expensive, highly publicized traffic accident? This is exactly what happens when sudden wealth is handed to an unprepared mind. What if the greatest obstacle standing between you and lasting prosperity isn't your current salary, your education level, your industry, or your background? What if the primary bottleneck is simply the version of you that is trying to receive it? We spend years obsessing over the vehicle, the business model, the real estate strategy, the stock portfolio, the side hustle, while completely ignoring the driver. But wealth is rarely lost because of a lack of opportunity. It is usually lost because the person receiving it has not yet become someone who can hold it. Earning is easier than keeping. Most people fundamentally misunderstand the nature of money. We treat it like a finish line, believing that if we can just cross a specific numerical threshold, all our financial anxieties will evaporate. Because of this, we spend our lives endlessly chasing capital. We chase promotions, we chase viral marketing trends, we chase the latest cryptocurrency that promises to turn pocket change into a private island. But here is the truth that financial advisors rarely mention: earning money is relatively easy. Keeping money is an entirely different psychological sport. Earning requires action, effort, and sometimes just a bit of right place, right time luck. Keeping requires identity. It requires emotional regulation, discipline, delayed gratification, and the ability to say no to both your own ego and the expectations of others. This is why lottery winners so often declare bankruptcy within 5 years of their windfall. This is why professional athletes who sign $100 million contracts frequently end up selling their championship rings to pay off debts. The money arrived, but the mindset remained in poverty. They earned the fortune, but they never became the person who could safely hold it. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment before we begin this journey. If a sudden windfall of $1 million landed in your bank account this afternoon, does your current character, your emotional maturity, and your level of self-discipline have the capacity to protect it, or would your old habits quietly destroy it? Why identity shapes your financial destiny. Your bank account is not a reflection of your worth as a human being, but it is often a flawless reflection of your subconscious identity. In your mind right now, there is an invisible ceiling on your abundance. This ceiling is built from the stories you were told about money as a child, the financial traumas you have endured, and your deepest beliefs about what you deserve. If your internal identity believes that money is scarce, evil, or inherently stressful, you will unconsciously reject prosperity even when it is handed to you on a silver platter. You will find a way to sabotage the successful business. You will suddenly decide to buy a luxury car you don't need just as your savings account starts looking healthy. Your nervous system will literally force you to spend your way back down to your comfort zone of financial stress. Real wealth is never just a financial achievement. It is a way of seeing the world. It is a nervous system that remains calm under pressure. It is a way of making decisions without being driven by fear or the desire to impress strangers on the internet. What you will discover. This audiobook is not a get-rich-quick manual. There are no secret stock tips hidden in these chapters, and I will not ask you to wake up at 4:37 a.m. to take an ice bath in the name of hustle culture. Instead, we are going to do something much more powerful. We are going to dismantle the psychological traps that keep brilliant, hardworking people trapped in the endless, exhausting cycle of chasing money. Over the next 15 chapters, we will explore why chasing wealth often pushes it further away. How to quiet the loud voice of scarcity that quietly controls your decisions. Why emotional regulation is the greatest financial skill you can master. How to build the quiet, boring habits that compound into unshakable success. How to hold on to your prosperity without losing your soul, your relationships, or your peace of mind. This journey is about becoming the kind of person wealthy feels safe visiting. It is about building an internal ecosystem so strong, so disciplined, and so peaceful that prosperity naturally decides to take up permanent residence. If you are tired of running, it is time to stop. Take a deep breath. Turn the page, or let the audio play on, and let's step into chapter 1. Let's stop chasing the money, and start becoming the person. The bloom within takeaway. The greatest financial investment you will ever make is not in a stock, a property, or a business. It is the quiet, deliberate transformation of your own identity. Introduction Summary. The Transformation Paradox. We mistakenly believe acquiring wealth will magically change our bad habits, when in reality, changing our habits is the prerequisite for acquiring sustainable wealth. The Formula 1 analogy: sudden wealth given to an unprepared mind is like giving a race car to an untrained driver. It usually results in a crash, not a championship. Earning versus keeping. Earning money requires effort and action, but holding on to money requires emotional maturity, discipline, and a secure identity. The invisible ceiling. Our subconscious beliefs and childhood conditioning dictate our financial reality, often causing us to self-sabotage when we exceed our internal comfort zone. The core premise: this book is not about financial shortcuts or extreme hustle, it is a guide to mastering the psychological and behavioral traits necessary to. Chapter 1, Stop Running After Money, It's Getting Tired. The Smile Before the Lesson. We have all treated money like a skittish stray cat. We spot it across the yard, move slowly so as not to startle it, and whisper sweet nothings like, "Here, little financial independence, come to Papa." Then we make one sudden movement, like checking a real estate app or buying a latte, and whoosh, it darts back under the porch. Some of us spend our entire lives sprinting behind a currency that seems to possess both track star speed and a personal vendetta against our peace of mind. We chase promotions. We chase side hustles that require waking up at 3:15 a.m. to churn organic lavender soap. We chase crypto tokens named after space dogs. And yet, after running a metaphorical marathon in flip-flops, we look down at our bank account and find it looking right back at us with the same vacant expression. Here is the secret nobody wants to tell you on financial Twitter: money is terrible at playing tag. When you chase it, you panic. When you panic, you look desperate. And just like a first date sweating through a polyester shirt, desperation is a total repellent. This chapter isn't about running faster. It's about stopping, sitting down, and asking why we're treating prosperity like an elusive ghost when wealth has actually been waiting for us to catch our breath. The story of the marathon runner and the stationary bike. Let me introduce you to Marcus. Marcus is a talented graphic designer who earned a respectable $70,000 a year. But Marcus lived in a state of perpetual financial hyperventilation. To Marcus, money was a wild beast that needed subduing. Every January, he would set a goal to hunt down wealth. He downloaded budgeting apps he never opened, bought 3 books on stock trading he used as monitor stands, and started a side hustle designing logos for local pet groomers. He was constantly doing something. His life was a blur of caffeine, invoices, and late-night panic scrolling. By November, Marcus had worked himself into burnout. His side hustle had netted him a grand total of $42, after expenses, and his main account balance looked like a flat line on a hospital monitor. One evening, exhausted and nursing a cup of lukewarm tea, Marcus watched his neighbor, Sarah. Sarah wasn't running anywhere. Sarah was an accountant who drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a bumper sticker that said, "My other car is a slightly newer Honda Civic." Sarah didn't chase money. She didn't look like she was starring in a hustle culture TikTok. But Sarah bought a rental property every 3 years, maxed out her retirement accounts while sleeping 8 hours a night, and looked like someone whose blood pressure was reliably normal. Marcus finally realized the painful truth: he wasn't failing because he lacked effort. He was failing because his entire financial life was built on panic. He was sprinting on a treadmill, sweating profusely, wondering why the scenery never changed. The behavioral psychology of the chase. Why do we do this? Why is our default reaction to financial stress more movement rather than more mastery? Behavioral psychology gives us a clue. When we feel out of control, whether it is our weight, our career, or our bank balance, our brains crave the illusion of productivity. Action lowers anxiety. If you feel broke, buying a planner or listening to a podcast about venture capital feels like wealth building. It releases a quick hit of dopamine. You feel productive without having to do the hard, quiet work of changing your identity. Think about how ridiculous this looks from the outside. We will spend 3 hours scouring the internet to save $4 on shipping. We will debate canceling a $12 streaming service while carrying a $12,000 credit card balance at 22% interest. We will refresh our mobile banking app like we are waiting for it to apologize and say, "Good news. We found an extra $10,000 behind the decimal point." We chase money because we believe money is the creator of security. But economics and human behavior tell a different story. Money is an amplifier, not an origin. When you chase money without changing who you are simply trying to outrun your own habits. If you are disorganized, impulsive, and terrified of scarcity when you make 50 grand, making 100 grand just means you can afford bigger, more expensive panics. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and look at your own rhythm. If someone secretly observed your financial habits for the past 30 days, would they conclude you were building a sustainable life, or simply running a very complicated, very exhausting race against your own anxiety? The story of the overcorrecting shopper. Meet Chloe. Chloe had a love-hate relationship with her bank account. Mostly hate. Whenever Chloe felt financially insecure, which was usually around Tuesday afternoon, she would go on what she called her financial cleanse. She would delete shopping apps, vow to eat plain rice for a month, and decide she was going to become a minimalist monk. This usually lasted for 4 days. By Friday evening, emotionally drained from restricting herself like a Victorian orphan, Chloe would snap. She'd log on to an online store and drop $300 on scented candles, a specialized garlic press she would never use, and a jacket that looked great on an Instagram model who was clearly standing in ideal lighting. Chloe wasn't buying things because she loved garlic or scented wax. She was buying things to soothe the emotional friction of feeling like her life was out of control. She was chasing the feeling of abundance because her daily reality felt like scarcity. As the great behavioral economist Dan Ariely might note, if he drank too much espresso, we do not make financial decisions with spreadsheets, we make them with our wounds, our egos, and our desire for immediate relief. When you chase money as an emotional escape hatch, you treat wealth like a lottery ticket rather than a garden. You want the fruit without planting the seed, weeding the dirt, or waiting for the sun to rise. The shift, becoming attractive to opportunity. So, how do you stop chasing? You stop running and start becoming magnetic. In physics, objects don't chase each other, they respond to gravitational fields. In the world of personal finance, opportunities, clients, raises, and smart investments do not gravitate toward the desperate. They gravitate toward the stable. They move toward competence. They find the person who has quieted their nervous system, mastered their habits, and learned to manage a little before demanding a lot. Think about the people you trust in your own life. Do you trust the frantic, chaotic person who is always scheming their next big break and borrowing $20 for gas? Or do you trust the steady, reliable person who shows up, does good work, handles setbacks without throwing a tantrum, and quietly keeps their promises? Money acts the exact same way. It is drawn to stewardship. When you stop treating money as an enemy to be conquered or a god to be appeased, something shifts. You stop asking, how can I get more, and start asking, who do I need to become so that more is safe in my hands? The bloom within takeaway. Money rarely stays where fear is in charge. Stop chasing the currency, and start cultivating the character that makes wealth feel at home. Chapter Summary. The trap of the chase, pursuing money through frantic action, constant side hustles, and panic-driven goals only leads to exhaustion, mirroring a hamster running on a treadmill. Action versus mastery. Behavioral psychology shows we use busywork, like buying planners or reading trading books, to soothe financial anxiety without doing the deep identity work. Money as an amplifier. Wealth does not fix underlying behavioral flaws, it simply magnifies them, turning small financial habits into large-scale financial stress. Emotional escapism, impulse buying and financial cleanses are often emotional responses to scarcity and stress rather than rational choices. The law of magnetism. True prosperity comes from stopping the chase, regulating your nervous system, and becoming a. Chapter 2. Your financial identity is quietly running your bank account. The smile before the lesson. We have all met someone who insists they are just terrible with money, usually right before tapping their card for a round of craft cocktails and explaining how cryptocurrency is going to fund their retirement in Belize. We treat our financial identity like an unchangeable blood type. We say it with the same casual resignation as, oh, I'm just allergic to shellfish and bad at budgeting. We inherit our parents' money anxieties like a vintage coat that doesn't quite fit and wear it proudly for decades. If your father believed that rich people were secretly plotting world domination and your mother treated every grocery receipt like a crime scene, congratulations, your brain is currently running a software program written in 1994. The funniest part is watching how fiercely we defend these identities. Tell someone they could save $100 a month, and they will look at you with the moral indignation of a saint. You don't understand, they whisper. I am a coffee enthusiast. I cannot simply consume bean water like a peasant. We build entire personality constructs around our financial dysfunction, as if being broke or perpetually stressed is a quirky character trait like collecting antique spoons. This chapter isn't about shaming your past habits. It's about updating the operating system running quietly in the background of your mind. The story of the invisible ceiling. Let me introduce you to David. David was an exceptionally talented software engineer who could write complex code in his sleep. Yet, no matter how many promotions he received, David managed to experience a financial bottleneck right around the $80,000 mark. Whenever his salary crept up, his life mysteriously expanded to match it. A raise would hit, and suddenly his car needed a transmission overhaul, his apartment required a designer couch, or an emergency trip to a destination wedding appeared out of the ether. By December, David was back to his baseline zero, wondering why wealth felt like a ghost he could never quite catch. David hired a financial coach, expecting spreadsheets and investment charts. Instead, the coach asked him a strange question. What did your parents say when someone drove an expensive car through your neighborhood growing up? David blinked. Memories flooded back. He remembered his father standing on the porch, watching a sleek Mercedes drive past, shaking his head and muttering, must be nice to steal from people to afford that. He remembered his mother whispering that wealthy people were cold, greedy, and morally bankrupt. Right there, tucked away in the filing cabinet of David's subconscious, was an invisible rulebook: to be wealthy is to be bad. To be a good person, you must struggle. Without realizing it, David was sabotaging his own bank account because his subconscious mind viewed financial success as a threat to his moral identity. He preferred the safety of a modest bank account over the terrifying prospect of becoming someone his childhood self would have judged. The neuroscience of subconscious scripts. Why do our internal beliefs hold such a chokehold on our financial reality? Neuroscience tells us that our brains are prediction machines designed to keep us safe, not rich. By the time we reach adulthood, our core beliefs about money, worth, and survival are hardwired into our neural pathways. These pathways act like deep riverbeds, water naturally flows where it has flowed before. When you try to make more money or hold on to savings while carrying a deep subconscious belief that you are unlucky or destined to struggle, your brain experiences cognitive dissonance. It feels unsafe. If you believe money is scarce, your brain will actively scan your environment for threats, inflation warnings, and reasons to panic. If you believe you are unworthy of abundance, your brain will unconsciously botch interviews, miss opportunities, or spend excess cash just to restore your familiar state of lack. Think about how bizarre our internal monologues can be. We will work 80-hour weeks trying to build a business, but the moment a large client offers to pay our full rate, our inner voice panics. Who do I think I am charging that much? They're going to find out I'm a fraud. As the great psychologist Carl Jung noted, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Financial struggles are rarely a math problem, they are almost always a mirror problem. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and look inward. What did the adults around you say about money when you were 10 years old? Are you still living out their financial fears as if they were your own sacred laws? The story of the two neighbors and the lottery ticket. Meet Arthur and Julian. Arthur and Julian lived in identical townhomes, drove identical cars, and worked identical middle management jobs earning $55,000 a year. One weekend, both men bought a lottery ticket at the local gas station. And by some cosmic statistical anomaly, both men won $50,000. Arthur's internal script went something like this: I am blessed, but money is slippery. This is a tool to buy me breathing room and build a foundation. Arthur paid off his credit cards, put $20,000 into a low-cost index fund, and used a small sliver to take his family out for a nice dinner. 2 years later, Arthur's life was measurably calmer, and his net worth was steadily compounding. Julian's internal script was entirely different. Julian's script whispered, finally. I can prove I'm successful. Within 48 hours, Julian had leased a luxury sports car he couldn't afford to insure, bought a watch that cost more than his monthly rent, and started buying rounds for acquaintances at the local bar who suddenly found his jokes hilarious. 16 months later, the money was gone, the sports car had been repossessed, and Julian was $10,000 deeper in debt, muttering about how the system was rigged against working people. The money didn't change Arthur or Julian. It simply gave them a loudspeaker to broadcast their underlying financial identities. The shift: rewriting your financial DNA. You cannot outearn a broken financial identity. You can stack side hustles until your eyes cross, but if your internal operating system believes you are meant to struggle, you will find a creative way to distribute that wealth back into the universe. Rewriting your financial identity requires 3 deliberate steps. Expose the hidden scripts. Write down every limiting phrase you heard about money growing up. Bring them out of the dark shadows of your subconscious and look at them in the daylight. Are they factual laws of the universe, or just someone else's leftover fear? Upgrade your self-concept. Wealthy people do not see money as an emergency to be survived or a trophy to prove their worth. They see it as a tool, an exchange of value, and a quiet responsibility. Ask yourself, how would a financially secure, emotionally mature person handle this exact situation? Practice small alignment. Identity doesn't change overnight through grand declarations. It changes through micro-habits. Saving $10 when you want to spend $50 isn't about the $10, it's a vote cast for a new identity. Every time you make a calm, intentional financial choice, you are whispering to your nervous system, we are safe here. We are builders now. The Bloom Within takeaway. Your bank account is simply a printer for your subconscious beliefs. If you want a different statement, you must update the document in your mind. Chapter Summary. The Financial Identity Trap. People often adopt fixed, unhelpful personas around money, treating financial habits as immutable traits rather than adjustable skills. The root of subconscious scripts. Deep-seated childhood conditioning and parental messaging create an invisible ceiling, making financial success feel morally threatening or unsafe. Neuroscience and safety. The brain prefers familiar states of scarcity over unfamiliar states of abundance, leading to subconscious self-sabotage when wealth increases. Amplifying character. Windfalls and raises do not fix financial chaos, they simply magnify the underlying identity and psychological script of the receiver. Rewriting the narrative. Transforming your financial life requires identifying old limiting beliefs, upgrading your self-concept, and casting daily. Chapter 3, Why More Income Doesn't Automatically Create More Wealth. The smile before the lesson. We have all fallen for the grand illusion that our financial problems would vanish if we just made 20% more money. We convince ourselves that $30,000 a year is a cage, $50,000 is a struggle, and $80,000 is where the angels finally start singing. If I could just hit 6 figures, we whisper to our reflection while brushing our teeth, all my problems would evaporate like morning mist. Then, by some miracle of career persistence, you get the promotion. The new salary hits your account. For about 48 hours, you feel like an absolute financial titan. You buy the expensive guacamole without hesitation. You look at restaurant menus right side first, checking descriptions instead of prices. And then, with terrifying punctuality, lifestyle creep moves into your life like an uninvited cousin who doesn't understand personal boundaries. Suddenly, your modest apartment feels tragically small. Your perfectly functional car develops a mysterious, expensive attitude. You realize you need a smart refrigerator that orders almond milk automatically because your life is simply too fast-paced for manual grocery shopping. Before you know it, you are making 6 figures and somehow stressing over credit card statements with the exact same frantic energy you had when you made minimum wage. This chapter isn't about shaming your desire to earn more. It's about understanding why pouring more water into a bucket with a massive hole at the bottom only makes you wetter, not wealthier. The story of the triple raise employee. Let me introduce you to Maya. Maya was a brilliant project manager who started her career earning $45,000 a year. At 45 grand, Maya lived in a modest studio apartment, cooked her meals, and panicked quietly whenever an unexpected dental bill arrived. Within 5 years, through sheer competence and strategic job hopping, Maya's salary climbed to $95,000. By all external metrics, Maya should have been stacking cash. She should have been building an investment portfolio that made her bank manager smile. Instead, Maya's net worth was hovering dangerously close to zero, and her credit card balance looked like a phone number. How did this happen? When Maya made 45 grand, she drank store-brand coffee. When she hit 60 grand, she upgraded to local artisanal roast because she had earned it. When she hit 75 grand, her apartment required in-unit laundry and a view that didn't face a brick wall, because, as she told her friends, mental health is an investment, guys. By the time she crossed 95 grand, she was leasing a luxury crossover, paying for 3 fitness memberships she rarely used, and taking 2 international vacations a year to recover from burnout. Maya hadn't built wealth. She had built an expensive lifestyle that required her to run twice as fast just to stay in the same place. When her mentor finally looked at her finances, he didn't hand her a stock market guide. He asked a simple question, Maya, are you building a future, or are you just renting an expensive performance of success? The behavioral economics of lifestyle inflation. Why does more money so often translate into more mess? Behavioral economists call this phenomenon hedonic adaptation combined with lifestyle inflation. Humans are astonishingly good at normalizing luxury. The moment you upgrade your environment, whether it is a nicer car, a bigger home, or designer shoes, your baseline shifts. What felt like an extravagant treat on Friday becomes your basic human right by Tuesday. Think about how our brains rationalize spending every time a raise hits. I worked 60 hours this week, I deserve this designer jacket. We're making more money now, we can't possibly shop at that discount grocery store anymore. Everyone in my office drives a European car, what will clients think if I pull up in a hatchback? We use income as a report card for our worth. If we feel successful on the inside, we feel compelled to project success on the outside. We buy things we don't need, with money we don't have, to impress people we secretly don't even like. As Morgan Housel famously observed in the realm of financial psychology, spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. When income increases without a corresponding upgrade in behavioral discipline, wealth doesn't grow. Only overhead grows. You become a high-earning hostage to your own expenses. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and look at your own financial trajectory. If your income were to suddenly double tomorrow, would that extra money flow into assets that buy your freedom, or would it simply fund a louder, shinier version of your current stress? The story of the two diverging careers. Meet two college roommates, Liam and Noah, who graduated with identical degrees and started their careers at the exact same salary, $50,000. Liam believed wealth was about accumulation. Whenever Liam got a raise or a bonus, he treated 50% of that increase as if it never happened. He didn't live like a monk, he still went out with friends and enjoyed life, but his fixed overhead stayed remarkably flat. When he started making $90,000, he still drove his paid-off sedan, lived in a modest apartment, and quietly routed the difference into broad market index funds and a down payment for a rental property. Noah believed wealth was about expression. To Noah, income was a license to upgrade. When Noah hit $90,000, he upgraded his apartment, bought a luxury watch, started dining at high-end restaurants weekly, and financed a sports car. 10 years later, Liam's investment portfolio was generating enough passive income to cover his basic living expenses. He had optionality. He could work because he wanted to, not because he was terrified of missing a mortgage payment. Noah, meanwhile, was making $120,000, and was genuinely stressed because his monthly overhead consumed every single penny. A single month without a bonus sent him spiraling into anxiety. Liam hadn't just outsaved Noah, he had outthought him. Liam understood that wealth is what you don't see. It is the cars you didn't buy, the clothes you didn't dry clean, and the expensive square footage you didn't rent. The shift, decoupling income from identity. Breaking the cycle of income inflation requires a fundamental shift in how you view money entering your life. The raise quarantine rule: whenever you receive a raise or a windfall, commit to quarantining at least half of it before it ever touches your checking account. Automatically route it toward investments, savings, or debt reduction. Treat the raise as if it were smaller than it actually is, allowing your lifestyle to lag safely behind your earning power. Audit your status symbols. Look closely at your recurring expenses. Which ones are buying you genuine, deep-seated joy, and which ones are renting you temporary approval from an audience that isn't paying attention? Redefine prosperity. True financial freedom isn't measured by how expensive your lifestyle looks on a Friday night. It is measured by how many months you could peacefully survive if your primary income source paused tomorrow. When you stop treating income as an excuse to spend and start treating it as raw material for building long-term security, you stop running on the high-earning treadmill. You finally build a bucket that holds water. The Bloom Within takeaway. Earning more money without changing your financial habits is like upgrading your car engine while leaving the parking brake permanently engaged. You'll burn a lot of fuel, but you won't go anywhere. Chapter summary. The income illusion. Believing that higher earnings alone will solve financial stress ignores the underlying behavioral trap of lifestyle inflation. Hedonic adaptation. Humans quickly normalize luxury, turning temporary treats into mandatory baseline expenses and leaving net worth stagnant despite salary growth. The cost of performance, spending money to project success or keep up with peers, drains capital that should be building real, sustainable freedom. Wealth versus overhead. True wealth consists of what you choose not to spend, accumulate, and invest, rather than the flashy lifestyle you display publicly. The raise quarantine. Breaking the cycle requires automatically routing a major portion of new income into wealth-building asset. Chapter 4, Scarcity has a loud voice. The smile before the lesson. We have all met someone who treats buying a $4 box of tea bags with the grim solemnity of negotiating a nuclear disarmament treaty. Scarcity is a dramatic roommate. It never knocks, it kicks the door down. While abundance is quiet, confident, and takes its time walking down the cereal aisle, scarcity is sweating under fluorescent lights, muttering about inflation, and convinced that if you don't buy the discounted canned peaches right now, civilization will collapse before breakfast. We love to think our financial choices are driven by cold, rational logic. Yet, walk into a grocery store when you're stressed, and watch how quickly primal fear takes the wheel. You'll find yourself hoarding canned lentils you've never eaten, justifying a bulk purchase of paper towels that will require renting a storage unit, and feeling a sudden surge of moral panic because you picked the name brand dish soap. The funniest part about scarcity is how egalitarian it is. It doesn't care if you have $50 in your checking account or 50,000. Scarcity isn't a reflection of your bank balance, it's an operating system running on pure, unfiltered panic. And until you turn down its volume, no amount of money will ever feel like enough. The story of the stockpile and the empty freezer. Let me introduce you to Clara. Clara grew up in a household where money was treated like oxygen during a deep-sea dive, constantly running out, highly contested, and the source of every family argument. Even as an adult with a stable income and a healthy emergency fund, Clara lived in a state of perpetual financial hyperventilation. Her apartment looked like a bunker designed by an anxious accountant. Her closets were jammed with 3 years' worth of discounted shampoo, her freezer was packed so tight with clearance meat that the door barely closed, and she checked her banking app 6 times a day as if expecting the numbers to suddenly vanish in a puff of smoke. One evening, a friend came over for dinner. When Clara opened her overstuffed freezer to look for chicken, an avalanche of frozen peas tumbled out onto the kitchen floor. Her friend laughed and said, "Clara, are you preparing for a municipal emergency, or are you just trying to feed 2 people?" Clara froze. For the first time, she looked at her chaotic apartment and realized the truth. Her bank account had grown, but her nervous system was still living in the poverty of her childhood. She was making a comfortable living, but she was spending her mental energy as if she were one missed paycheck away from sleeping on a park bench. No matter how much money Clara earned, she couldn't taste her success because scarcity was sitting at the head of her table, whispering that disaster was always 1 second away. The psychology of scarcity brain. Why does fear of lack grip us so tightly, even when we have enough? Behavioral psychologists have studied what happens to human cognitive function when we feel strapped for resources. When scarcity takes over your brain, it creates what researchers call tunnel vision. Your mental bandwidth narrows entirely to immediate survival. Think about how scarcity alters your daily decision-making. You spend 20 minutes driving across town to save $3 on gas, completely ignoring the value of your own time. You hesitate to invest in a course, a tool, or a book that could transform your career because the immediate price tag screams risk, while ignoring the massive cost of staying stuck. You hoard money in low-yield checking accounts, paralyzed by the fear of making a wrong move, while inflation quietly eats away at your purchasing power. Scarcity convinces you that every financial decision is a life-or-death gamble. It turns buying a birthday gift for a friend into an agonizing internal trial about whether generosity is a luxury you can afford. As psychologist Dr. Breen Brown notes, scarcity tells us we are never enough, never safe enough, and never ahead enough. When your financial life is anchored in fear, you aren't building wealth, you are just managing anxiety with currency. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and examine your relationship with spending. When you hesitate to invest in your growth or enjoy the fruits of your labor, is your hesitation rooted in wise stewardship, or is it simply fear wearing a very convincing disguise? The story of the 2 investors in a down market. Meet 2 investors, Marcus and Julian, who both had $20,000 saved in a diversified index fund during a sudden market downturn. When the stock market dropped 15% in a single month, Julian's scarcity brain took total control. He stared at his portfolio dashboard, his heart racing as if he were being chased by a bear. Convinced he was about to lose everything, Julian sold his investments at the absolute bottom, locking in his losses just to feel the relief of having cash in hand. Scarcity whispered, "At least you saved what's left." Marcus felt a brief twinge of anxiety too. But Marcus recognized the voice of scarcity for what it was, an alarm system triggered by uncertainty. Instead of panicking, Marcus took a deep breath, reminded himself of his long-term strategy, and quietly automated an extra monthly contribution to buy assets while they were on sale. 3 years later, the market recovered and surged past its previous highs. Marcus watched his portfolio expand significantly because he stayed calm. Julian sat on the sidelines, still holding his cash in a low-yield savings account, too terrified of volatility to ever re-enter the market. Julian's problem wasn't market volatility, it was internal volatility. Scarcity had made him blind to opportunity because it was too busy screaming about fear. The shift, cultivating an abundance mindset. Moving past scarcity doesn't mean spending recklessly or ignoring financial reality. It means shifting your internal dialogue from survival to stewardship. Catch the panic narrative. The next time you feel a surge of financial anxiety over a routine expense or a minor market dip, pause. Ask yourself, is this decision based on current facts, or is it my old programming talking? Shift from hoarding to flow. Scarcity focuses entirely on holding on tightly to every penny out of fear it will never return. Abundance focuses on circulation, investing wisely, paying for value that saves time, and treating money as a tool that flows in and out with purpose. Build emotional reserves. Just as you need a financial emergency fund, you need an emotional buffer. Give yourself permission to pause before making financial choices when you are stressed, tired, or emotionally depleted. When you quiet the loud, panicked voice of scarcity, you create the mental space required to build sustainable, long-term prosperity. The bloom within takeaway. Scarcity makes every dollar look like a lifeline and every expense like a threat. Real wealth begins the moment you realize safety is a state of mind, not a hoarding strategy. Chapter Summary. The dramatic roommate. Scarcity acts as an internal alarm system that operates on panic, regardless of whether your bank balance is low or high. Tunnel vision and bandwidth. Financial fear narrows cognitive function, causing people to make short-sighted decisions, hoard resources, and miss out on long-term growth. Emotional versus rational risk. Operating from scarcity turns ordinary market fluctuations or investments into terrifying gambles, leading to self-sabotaging behavior. Stewardship versus hoarding. Escaping the scarcity trap requires shifting away from survival-based hoarding and toward thoughtful asset circulation and peace of mind. Building emotional buffers. Developing calm nervous system responses to money allows you to make clear. Chapter 5. Your nervous system has a budget too. The smile before the lesson. We have all met someone who can read a spreadsheet with the cold precision of a Swiss watchmaker, yet the moment their Wi-Fi drops for 30 seconds, they look ready to renounce civilization and live in a cave. We obsess endlessly over our financial budgets. We categorize our lattes, track our subscriptions down to the penny, and audit our grocery receipts like forensic accountants. But we completely ignore the most expensive budget in our lives, our nervous system. The funniest part is watching how we try to solve emotional dysregulation with financial transactions. Have you ever noticed how a hard day at work magically transforms into an urgent need to order 3 pairs of artisanal running shoes you will never wear? Or how a stressful family gathering makes you feel like dropping $200 on takeout sushi is not just a meal, but a human rights necessity? We treat our bank accounts like an emotional shock absorber. When life bumps into us too hard, we cushion the blow with purchases, hoping that buying something shiny will calm our racing heartbeat. This chapter isn't about cutting out every joy in your life. It's about realizing that until your nervous system learns to handle pressure without spending money, your bank account will always pay the price for your stress. The story of the midnight cart and the overwhelmed manager. Let me introduce you to Juliana. Juliana was a brilliant operations manager who handled multi-million-dollar corporate accounts by day. She was cool, collected, and unflappable during boardroom crises. Yet, Juliana had a secret financial habit that she hid even from herself. Whenever a stressful project peaked or she had a grueling argument with her boss, Juliana's midnight routine was predictable. Around 11:30 p.m., sitting in her quiet apartment with a cup of chamomile tea, she would open her favorite online shopping app. It started innocently, adding items to a cart while decompressing. But within 20 minutes, her stressed brain would kick in. The cart would swell with expensive skincare sets, cashmere sweaters she didn't need, and high-end kitchen gadgets designed for a cooking lifestyle she simply didn't have time to live. To Juliana's exhausted nervous system, hitting the place order button delivered a micro-hit of dopamine. It was a chemical rescue mission. In a life where she felt constantly overworked and underappreciated, buying things felt like reclaiming control. The wake-up call came at the end of the quarter when she reviewed her credit card statement and found $1,200 in impulse purchases, none of which had solved her actual stress at work. Juliana realized she wasn't shopping because she loved skincare or cooking. She was using her credit card to self-medicate a dysregulated nervous system. Her wallet was footing the bill for her emotional exhaustion. The neuroscience of stress and spending. Why does stress make us throw our financial discipline out the window? Neuroscience gives us a clear window into this expensive habit. When you are chronically stressed, overworked, or emotionally depleted, your brain's prefrontal cortex, the rational part responsible for delayed gratification, budgeting, and long-term planning, goes offline. In its place, the amygdala takes over. This is your primitive survival center, and its primary job is seeking immediate relief and safety. When your nervous system is overloaded, it screams for comfort. And in our modern consumer society, comfort is conveniently sold to us in one-click increments. Consider how your spending habits shift when you are exhausted. You stop cooking because the thought of washing a dish feels like scaling Mount Everest, so you spend triple on delivery. You justify expensive convenience services because you are too tired to think, draining hundreds of dollars a month in friction fees. You buy lottery tickets or speculative investments not out of logic, but out of a desperate subconscious desire for an escape hatch from your current reality. As behavioral researchers note, self-control is a finite resource. If you spend all day suppressing your frustration in a toxic job or managing family chaos, your willpower tank is completely empty by evening. That is precisely when the targeted ads find you, offering instant emotional relief for the low price of your savings account. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own spending patterns. When you make your most impulsive or expensive purchases, are you buying something you genuinely value? Or are you simply trying to soothe a nervous system that is begging for rest? The story of the two entrepreneurs under pressure. Meet two freelance consultants, David and Marcus, who both hit a sudden dry spell when two major clients delayed their contracts in the same month. David's nervous system went straight into red alert. His chest tightened, he lost sleep, and panic took over. To soothe his mounting anxiety, David tried to force outcomes. He panicked emailed 50 new prospects with desperate pitches, dropped his rates by half just to secure quick cash, and spent money on expensive masterclasses promising overnight business turnarounds. His frantic energy repelled clients, and his anxious spending dug a deeper financial hole. Marcus felt the exact same fear when his contracts were delayed. But Marcus had practiced nervous system regulation. Instead of reacting, Marcus took a walk, breathed deeply, and acknowledged that dry spells are a normal part of business cycles. Instead of panic spending or cheapening his brand, Marcus used the unexpected free time to audit his current systems, rest, and calmly nurture relationships with past clients. Within 3 weeks, one of his original clients returned with an expanded contract. Marcus didn't survive the dry spell because he was smarter than David. He survived because his nervous system stayed calm enough to let his intelligence work. The shift, upgrading your emotional currency. If you want a stable bank account, you must first build a stable nervous system. You cannot outbudget a chronic stress response. Identify your stress triggers, map out the specific emotional states that precede your impulse purchases or financial panics. Are you bored? Lonely? Overworked? Disrespected? Name the emotion so you don't try to solve it with a shopping cart. Create non-financial soothers. Build a toolkit of low-cost or free ways to regulate your nervous system when it feels overloaded: a long walk, a phone call with a grounded friend, deep breathing, or journaling. Give your brain the dopamine hit it needs without involving your credit card. Install a 48-hour rule. Adopt a strict mandatory waiting period for any non-essential purchase made after 8 p.m. or during a stressful day. If you still genuinely need it 48 hours later when your nervous system is calm, buy it with a clear conscience. When you stop outsourcing your emotional regulation to your bank account, you keep your cash where it belongs, working for your future rather than paying for your stress. The Bloom Within takeaway. A dysregulated nervous system will always find a way to spend your future freedom for present comfort. True wealth requires learning how to sit with discomfort without opening your wallet. Chapter Summary. The emotional budget. People meticulously track financial budgets while completely ignoring their nervous system budget, often using purchases as emotional shock absorbers. The brain under stress. Chronic stress shuts down the rational prefrontal cortex, handing control over to primitive survival instincts that crave instant, one-click relief. Exhaustion spending. Fatigue drives expensive convenience fees, impulse shopping, and reactionary financial decisions designed to soothe psychological exhaustion rather than fulfill real needs. Calm versus panic response. Remaining emotionally regulated during business or personal dry spells prevents desperate financial moves and attracts sustainable stability. Protecting your cash. Establishing non-financial soothing tools and a mandatory waiting period stops emotional spending and preserves long-term wealth. Chapter 6. The Habits Millionaires Never Post About. The Smile Before the Lesson. We have all watched a viral video of someone claiming they built a 7-figure empire purely because they wake up at 3:14 a.m., plunge face-first into freezing ice water while listening to audiobooks in ancient Greek, and consume a smoothie made of crushed almonds and unyielding ambition. Social media loves to portray wealth as an extreme sport. It wants you to believe that becoming financially secure requires a daily routine so exhausting and punishing that you'll look like an extra from a medieval drama by Tuesday afternoon. The funniest part is watching people buy into this myth, purchasing $50 journals, downloading apps that track their sleep cycles down to the millisecond, and scheduling their days with the intensity of an air traffic controller. All while ignoring the actual, boring habits that quietly build real fortunes. Millionaires in the wild do not usually spend their mornings shouting motivational mantras into a ring light. More often, they are doing things so aggressively mundane that nobody would ever film them. They are reviewing boring spreadsheets, saying no to expensive dinners with people they don't like, and quietly letting their investments compound while eating toast. This chapter isn't about transforming into a robotic productivity machine. It's about discovering the quiet, unglamorous daily practices that actually keep wealth alive when the cameras are turned off. The story of the flashy founder and the quiet operator. Let me introduce you to two business owners in the same city, Damien and Vincent. Damien was the darling of local entrepreneurial circles. If you opened Instagram, Damien was always there. Speaking at panel events, posing in front of rented sports cars, and posting daily motivational quotes about grinding while everyone else slept. Damien's lifestyle screamed success. He wore designer suits, hosted lavish parties, and lived in a high-rise penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows. Vincent, on the other hand, ran a regional logistics company with zero social media presence. Vincent drove a 6-year-old pickup truck, wore clothes that looked comfortable rather than expensive, and worked out of a modest office overlooking a gravel parking lot. When a sudden economic downturn hit their industry, Damien's flash flood business model crumbled within months. His high overhead, financed luxury assets, and reliance on brand image became an anchor dragging him down. Because his empire was built on performance rather than substance, he had no cash reserves when revenue dipped. Vincent didn't even blink. While Damien was quietly negotiating with bankruptcy lawyers, Vincent calmly deployed capital from a robust emergency fund, acquired 2 of his struggling competitors at a discount, and kept every single one of his employees on the payroll. Damien looked wealthy. Vincent was wealthy. The difference wasn't talent or luck. It was a completely different set of daily, invisible habits. The power of micro-compound interest. Why do we fall for the myth of the flashy overnight success? Human brains are wired to look for dramatic narratives. We want a hero's journey where a sudden epiphany or a heroic hustle transforms everything in 30 days. But real wealth doesn't operate like a movie script, it operates like a glacier. It moves slowly, silently, and with immense, unstoppable weight. Consider the habits that actually compound over time. Automated discretion, setting up automatic transfers to savings and investments so you never have to rely on willpower to do the right thing. The pause before purchase, cultivating a 24-hour rule for non-essential spending, starving impulse habits while feeding long-term peace of mind. Continuous auditing. Reviewing subscriptions, fixed costs, and financial leaks once a quarter with the calm detachment of a scientist rather than the panic of a debtor. None of these habits look impressive on a vision board. None of them will earn you applause on TikTok. But as financial experts frequently note, wealth is almost always built by what you do repeatedly when nobody is watching. Think about physical health. You don't get fit by working out for 14 hours straight once a year. You get fit by doing 20 minutes of movement every single day. Finances work the exact same way. Small, Boring, consistent behaviors beat heroic, exhausting bursts of effort every single time. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and look at your daily routine. Are your financial habits designed to look impressive for an audience today, or are they quietly building a fortress for your future self? The story of the two coffee enthusiasts. Meet two colleagues, Sarah and Jenna, who both started their careers making $60,000 a year and shared a daily passion for gourmet coffee. Sarah viewed her morning coffee as a sacred ritual, but she also understood compounding math. Instead of buying a $6 latte every single workday plus artisanal pastries, Sarah brewed high-end coffee at home 4 days a week, saving the cafe visit as a genuine Friday treat. She took the difference, roughly $120 a month, and automatically routed it into a diversified index fund. Jenna laughed at Sarah's homebrewing setup, insisting that life was too short to compromise on morning caffeine and treating herself to premium coffee and snacks twice a day without tracking the expense. "You only live once," Jenna would say, sipping her iced macchiato. 20 years later, Sarah's automated micro-investments had compounded into a six-figure portfolio that gave her complete career freedom. Jenna still enjoyed her daily coffee, but she was deeply stressed about retirement, realizing too late that small, daily financial choices carry massive long-term consequences. Sarah didn't suffer, she simply redirected her resources from short-term sensory hits to long-term freedom. The shift, embracing the unglamorous routine. If you want to stop chasing money and start holding wealth, you must fall in love with boring consistency. Automate your wealth protection, remove willpower from the equation. Set up automatic deductions for savings and investments on the exact day your paycheck lands. What you never see enter your checking account is money you will never accidentally spend on lifestyle creep. Normalize being unimpressed. Stop measuring your success by how flashy your lifestyle looks to neighbors or social media followers. True wealth feels quiet, secure, and understated. Focus on systems over goals. Goals give you a destination, but systems give you a daily reality. Build a simple financial checklist that runs in the background of your life, requiring minimal emotional energy to maintain. When you stop trying to star in a cinematic financial success story and start embracing the quiet, unglamorous habits of real builders, prosperity stops running away and quietly moves in. The bloom within takeaway. Flashy habits attract attention, but boring habits attract wealth. The most powerful financial routine is the one you can repeat every single day without burning out. Chapter Summary. The social media myth. Popular media portrays wealth building as an extreme, punishing daily grind, distracting people from the real, quiet habits that sustain fortunes. Performance versus substance. Flashy lifestyles and external markers of success often mask fragile financial foundations that collapse under economic pressure. The power of compounding. Real wealth grows slowly through small, repetitive behaviors rather than dramatic, heroic bursts of effort. Automated consistency. Removing willpower by automating savings and investments ensures financial progress happens quietly in the background of life. Embracing the mundane, sustainable prosperity relies on unglamorous systems, resisting social comparison, and prioritizing long-term security over. Chapter 7. Opportunities usually arrive wearing work clothes. The smile before the lesson. We have all watched a movie where the protagonist hits rock bottom, stares dramatically out a rain-streaked window, and suddenly finds a winning lottery ticket blowing onto their windowsill. Hollywood has taught us to view opportunity as a majestic, spontaneous lightning strike. We wait around for our big break, as if luck were a magical fairy godmother wandering through neighborhoods, looking for someone sitting on the couch eating chips who deserves a sudden financial rescue. The funniest part is how offended we get when opportunity actually knocks and discovers we aren't home. We complain that we never get lucky in our careers, yet we haven't updated our skills or learned anything new since the previous decade. We dream of launching a profitable business, but when someone asks us what problem we solve, we stare blankly like a deer caught in high-beam headlights. We expect investors, clients, or employers to hand us incredible opportunities while our professional presence looks like an abandoned digital wasteland. Luck is not a lightning strike, it is a harvest. And you cannot harvest a field you refuse to plant, weed, or water. This chapter isn't about waiting for a lucky break. It's about becoming the kind of prepared, competent person who can walk into a room of chaos and turn it into gold. The story of the two job seekers and the sudden opening. Let me introduce you to two colleagues, Brandon and Kevin, who worked as mid-level marketing coordinators at the same mid-sized firm. Brandon spent his evenings scrolling through job boards, complaining to his friends that the economy was rigged, and waiting for a headhunter to magically recognize his untapped genius and offer him a dream executive role with zero friction. Whenever a project came up at work that was slightly outside his job description, Brandon sighed and did the bare minimum. "That's above my pay grade," he would mutter. Kevin had a completely different philosophy. Kevin treated his job as a paid laboratory for mastering his craft. Whenever a messy, complicated client account landed on the desk, the kind of project everyone else avoided like expired seafood, Kevin raised his hand. He stayed late, studied industry trends, built templates to streamline the workflow, and learned how the company's finances actually operated from top to bottom. Then, lightning struck. The company's director of marketing suddenly resigned unexpectedly right before a major product launch. The executives needed someone who could step in immediately without dropping the ball. Brandon threw his hat in the ring, armed with his resume and a lot of ambition, but when asked how he would handle the crisis, he stumbled because he only knew his narrow slice of the department. Kevin stepped into the boardroom with calm competence. He didn't need a ramp-up period. He had spent the last 2 years studying the entire ecosystem of the business. He got the promotion, a massive pay bump, and equity in the firm. Brandon grumbled about how lucky Kevin was. Kevin knew that luck was simply a preparation meeting opportunity while wearing work clothes. The psychology of preparedness. Why do we spend so much time waiting for luck instead of building capacity? Behavioral science shows that our brains love shortcuts. Waiting for a lucky break requires zero cognitive effort and protects our egos. If you fail because you never got a break, you get to keep the comforting illusion that you are secretly brilliant. But if you take responsibility, build skills, and still stumble, you have to confront your own limitations. Consider how your brain reacts to opportunity. When an unexpected challenge arises, do you see it as a burden or a masterclass in disguise? When someone asks you to step up, do you panic and look for an exit, or do you lean in because you spent the quiet months preparing for this exact moment? As the Roman philosopher Seneca famously noted, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Most people mistake the opportunity for a golden ticket when it is actually a heavy shovel. It comes disguised as a difficult client, a broken system, an impossible deadline, or a project nobody else wants to touch. The unskilled see a problem and run away. The prepared see raw material and go to work. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and examine your professional life. If your dream opportunity walked through your door tomorrow morning, would your skills, discipline, and preparation be ready to hold it, or would you have to ask them to come back next year while you figure things out? The story of the two real estate investors. Meet two friends, Daniel and Samuel, who both wanted to break into real estate investing during a shifting market. Daniel spent thousands of dollars attending flashy real estate seminars in Las Vegas, buying custom business cards, and telling everyone at parties that he was an investor. But Daniel had never actually run the math on a single property, studied local zoning laws, or saved up dry capital. When a distressed property came on the market at a massive discount, Daniel couldn't pull the trigger because he didn't know how to evaluate a deal, secure rapid financing, or manage a contractor. Samuel didn't attend flashy seminars. Every Sunday morning for 2 years, Samuel sat at his kitchen table quietly analyzing 3 local properties, studying foreclosure listings, building relationships with local lenders, and learning how to calculate cash flow. When that exact same distressed property came on the market, Samuel recognized it instantly. Within 2 hours, he had run the numbers, drafted an offer, and secured the asset. Daniel called Samuel lucky. Samuel called it 2 years of Sunday mornings. The shift, cultivating active readiness. If you want prosperity to find you, you must stop waiting for a miracle and start building competence. Become excessively competent. Stop worrying about what you are being paid right now and start focusing on what you are learning. Master your domain so thoroughly that solving complex problems becomes your signature. Lean into the messy work. When a difficult project or an unglamorous task appears, volunteer. That is where the real education happens, and it is precisely where leadership is forged. Build your reserve capacity. Keep your financial and mental reserve strong so that when an opportunity demands capital or time, you can say yes without panic. When you stop treating life like a lottery and start treating it like a workshop, luck stops being an accident and starts becoming your permanent business partner. The bloom within takeaway. Opportunity rarely knocks on the door of the unprepared. It looks for the person who spent the quiet years sharpening their tools while everyone else was waiting for a miracle. Chapter Summary. The lottery fallacy, waiting for a spontaneous, lucky break, is a psychological defense mechanism that protects the ego from the hard work of self-improvement. Preparation versus luck. True opportunities do not look like golden tickets, they look like difficult problems, heavy tasks, and messy projects that test competence. Building capacity. Avoiding challenges limits growth, while volunteering for complex, unglamorous work builds the deep skills required to seize sudden openings. The investor's mindset, consistent, quiet preparation outperforms expensive seminars and superficial posturing every single time the market shifts. Becoming magnetic to success, shifting from a passive spectator to an active builder turns luck from a random accident into a predictable. Chapter 8, Wealth is built in boring moments. The smile before the lesson. We have all watched a movie montage where a brilliant entrepreneur stares at a glowing computer screen at 2 a.m., types 3 keys with dramatic intensity, and suddenly alarm bells ring, champagne corks fly, and confetti rains down from the ceiling. We love the explosion. We love the dramatic breakthrough, the sudden windfall, the viral moment when everything changes overnight. The funniest part is how utterly disappointed we are when we realize that building a real, sustainable financial life looks less like a Hollywood action sequence and more like watching paint dry on a very sensible, beige wall. We want the adrenaline rush of day trading crypto, but we hate the quiet discipline of reviewing a utility bill. We want the glory of launching a massively successful enterprise, but we roll our eyes at the unsexy, repetitive work of reconciling weekly receipts. We want our net worth to double by next Tuesday, while our daily routine consists of buying things we don't need with money we haven't earned yet to impress people we don't even like. True prosperity is not forged in moments of high drama. It is built in the quiet, uncelebrated, remarkably boring spaces of everyday life. This chapter isn't about finding a shortcut to riches. It's about discovering the quiet power of consistency when nobody is clapping. The story of the day trader and the index fund holder. Let me introduce you to two friends, Richard and Thomas, who both received a $20,000 inheritance on the exact same day. Richard was convinced he was destined to be a financial titan. He spent his evenings locked in his home office, surrounded by multiple computer monitors glowing with candlestick charts, trading cryptocurrencies, leveraged options, and microcap stocks with absolute intensity. Richard lived for the adrenaline rush of the market. He loved checking his portfolio 20 times a day, texting his friends about market dips, and feeling like a tactical genius whenever a trade went up 30% in an afternoon. Thomas didn't know a candlestick chart from a candle. Thomas took his $20,000, logged into a boring brokerage account, and automatically invested it in a low-cost, broad market index fund that tracked the overall economy. Then, Thomas closed the tab, set up an automatic monthly transfer of $200, and went back to tending his vegetable garden. 3 years later, Richard looked exhausted. His frantic trading strategy had experienced wild swings, and after factoring in transaction fees, capital gains taxes, and a few disastrous bets on meme coins, his initial $20,000 had shrunk to $14,000. Thomas checked his account once a year. His boring, unglamorous index fund had quietly compounded in the background, weathering market storms without breaking a sweat, and his portfolio had grown steadily past $30,000. Richard had all the excitement. Thomas had all the wealth. The psychology of compound consistency. Why do we find boring consistency so agonizingly difficult to maintain? Behavioral psychology shows that human brains are addicted to instant feedback. When you do something, you want an immediate reward. A like, a dopamine hit, a flashing notification, or a quick profit. Compound growth is the exact opposite of instant feedback. For a long time, consistency looks like nothing is happening at all. If you save $50 a week, your bank account doesn't magically transform overnight. If you read 20 pages of a business book every morning, you won't wake up tomorrow knowing the secrets of the universe. If you stick to your budget for a month, you won't suddenly feel like a billionaire. This deceptive delay is where most people give up. They abandon their wealth-building habits because they confuse a lack of visible drama with a lack of progress. As financial psychologist Morgan Housel points out, getting wealthy is about consistency and not getting in your own way for a long time. The most powerful financial strategies in history are astonishingly dull. They don't make good dinner party conversations. They don't inspire viral TikTok videos. But while the thrill seekers are burning out chasing the next shiny object, the quiet builders are letting time and discipline do the heavy lifting. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and look at your financial life. Are you constantly hunting for a thrilling financial shortcut, or are you willing to embrace the quiet, unglamorous power of doing the same boring, right things every single week? The story of the two restaurant owners. Meet two restaurateurs, Elena and Marcus, who ran similar neighborhood cafes in the same bustling district. Elena treated her business like a creative playground. She constantly rebranded her menu, chased trendy food fads, remodeled the dining room every 6 months to match changing aesthetic trends, and threw expensive launch parties for every new seasonal latte. Her cafe was always the talk of the town, but her cash flow was a chaotic roller coaster. She was constantly stressed about payroll because her overhead matched her dramatic operational style. Marcus ran his cafe with the emotional warmth of a monk and the precision of a Swiss clock. He kept his menu tight, audited his inventory suppliers every month to trim waste by pennies, negotiated steady rents, and put aside a fixed percentage of profits into a cash reserve before spending a dime on upgrades. Marcus didn't make the local lifestyle magazines, and his interior decor hadn't changed in 5 years. When a sudden economic squeeze hit the city, Elena's high overhead, trend-chasing cafe collapsed under the weight of its own drama. Marcus's cafe didn't just survive, it bought Elena's commercial equipment at a fraction of the cost. Marcus won because he understood that a business isn't a theater production, it is a system built on quiet, repetitive, unexciting execution. The shift. Falling in love with the ordinary. If you want to stop chasing money and start holding wealth, you must make peace with the ordinary. Automate the boring stuff, take human emotion and willpower completely out of your financial engine. Set your investments, savings, and bill payments on autopilot so they happen whether you feel inspired or not. Measure progress in years, not days, stop checking your net worth like it's a sports scoreboard. Wealth compounds best when left alone to do its quiet work in the dark. Celebrate stability over drama, teach your nervous system to find peace in a quiet, predictable balance sheet rather than the emotional roller coaster of financial risk-taking. When you stop demanding that your wealth-building journey look like a Hollywood movie, you finally unlock the quiet, unstoppable power of compounding time. The bloom within takeaway. The most profitable moments in your financial life will rarely feel exciting. Wealth is built by people who are brave enough to be boring while everyone else chases the spotlight. Chapter Summary. The Hollywood myth, expecting dramatic breakthroughs, instant windfalls, and high adrenaline trading success leads to poor financial decisions and burnout. Excitement versus returns. Active, high-drama financial strategies often underperform simple, consistent, and remarkably boring index fund investing over time. The illusion of stagnation. Compound growth takes time to show visible results, leading impatient people to abandon effective habits just before they pay off. Systems over drama. Sustainable businesses and personal fortunes are built on quiet, repetitive operational discipline rather than constant trend chasing. Embracing the ordinary. Automating finances, measuring progress over long horizons, and finding comfort in stability are the Chapter 9. Become someone money can trust. The smile before the lesson. We have all met someone who treats borrowing $20 with the elaborate evasion tactics usually reserved for international espionage operatives. You lend them a 20 spot for lunch, and suddenly they develop a rare neurological condition that makes them forget your name, avoid eye contact in hallways, and walk past you like you are a transparent ghost whenever money comes up in conversation. We love to complain about how untrustworthy the financial system is, how banks are rigged, and how the economy is out to get us. Yet, we rarely pause to ask the most uncomfortable question of all: if money were a conscious entity looking for a safe home, would it trust you? Would it trust you to treat it with respect, or would you immediately blow it on a pair of designer shoes you saw while half asleep on your phone at midnight? Would it trust you to honor your commitments, or do you treat credit card statements like mildly aggressive suggestions rather than sacred promises? Would it trust you to be a good steward of abundance, or would you panic the moment your balance ticks upward and look for the nearest luxury exit? Money is not just a medium of exchange, it is a mirror of integrity. Character is an invisible financial asset, and until you become someone wealthy you can safely visit, your bank account will continue to keep its distance. The story of the two borrowers and the handshake loan. Let me introduce you to two contractors in the same building trade, Marcus and Julian. Marcus was exceptionally talented, but he treated financial agreements with casual elasticity. If Marcus borrowed money from a supplier or a client gave him an advance for a project, repayment dates were treated as flexible guidelines. He would promise to pay on Friday, ghost the phone call, text on Monday with a vague excuse about bank transfers, and then post pictures of himself at a weekend music festival. Marcus wondered why suppliers stopped working with him and why loans were always so difficult to secure. Julian ran a modest carpentry business with average skills, but Julian operated with ironclad integrity. If Julian gave his word that an invoice would be settled by Tuesday at noon, you could set your watch by it. If a project hit a snag and he couldn't pay on time, Julian called before the deadline, explained the situation transparently, and offered a concrete solution. When a major commercial development project opened up in the city, the primary developer needed a reliable contractor to manage a $500,000 budget with zero oversight. Did they call Marcus, the flashy craftsman with erratic habits? Absolutely not. They handed the contract to Julian. Julian didn't get the project because he was the best carpenter in town, he got the project because capital flows naturally toward character. Money trusts integrity. The psychology of financial stewardship. Why is character the ultimate prerequisite for sustainable wealth? Behavioral economists and psychologists have long observed that capital without character is a ticking time bomb. When you lack personal discipline, responsibility, and honesty, larger amounts of money simply amplify your dysfunction on a grander scale. Consider how character shows up in ordinary financial management. Honoring commitments. Paying your bills, debts, and obligations on time, even when nobody is auditing you. Stewardship over status, treating the money you have right now with respect, rather than resenting it for not being $1 million. Accountability, refusing to blame the economy, your parents, or bad luck for financial choices that were entirely within your control. As the legendary investor Warren Buffett famously noted, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. When your financial character is shaky, your nervous system knows it. You will experience chronic subconscious anxiety even if you make a good salary, because deep down, you know your habits cannot sustain the abundance you are holding. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and look at your financial integrity. If a bank, a partner, or an investor audited your financial promises over the past year, your debts, your budgets, your commitments, would they conclude you are a person of absolute trust? The story of the two freelancers and the retainer client. Meet two freelance copywriters, Chloe and Sarah, who both landed a meeting with a major corporate client looking for a long-term retainer. Chloe was brilliantly creative, but she was notoriously flaky. She missed deadlines, blamed her Wi-Fi for delayed drafts, and treated billing terms like an annoyance. When the corporate client asked her to sign a contract with strict delivery milestones, Chloe rolled her eyes and tried to negotiate slack into the agreement. Sarah was solid, dependable, and meticulously honest. When Sarah promised a draft by Thursday at 9 a.m., it landed in the client's inbox at 8:45 a.m. If she made a mistake, she owned it immediately without making excuses. The corporate client passed on Chloe and awarded Sarah a 5-figure monthly retainer. Sarah didn't win the account because her writing was 5 times better than Chloe's. She won because reliability is rarer than talent. In a world full of clever people who cannot be trusted to show up on time, dependability is the ultimate competitive advantage. The shift, becoming a safe harbor for wealth. If you want prosperity to trust your address, you must build a character that can hold it. Audit your commitments, look at every small promise you have made regarding money. Unpaid loans, overdue bills, forgotten subscriptions, or broken budgets. Clean the slate and honor your word, starting with the smallest amounts. Treat small money with big respect. If you cannot manage $50 with discipline and gratitude, why do you expect the universe or the market to trust you with 50,000? Stewardship starts at the baseline. Remove excuses from your vocabulary. Stop treating your financial situation as something that is happening to you. Take total ownership of your choices, your debts, and your habits. When you become a person of unshakable integrity, money stops treating you like a temporary stopover and starts treating you like a permanent home. The bloom within takeaway. Money flows away from chaos and settles permanently with character. If you want abundance to trust you, start by becoming someone who keeps their financial promises. Chapter Summary. The Mirror of Integrity. Financial choices, debt handling, and promises reflect personal character far beyond mere mathematical calculations. Character as capital, capital flows toward reliability and trust. Flashy skills cannot outrun a track record of broken financial commitments. Stewardship at every level, managing small amounts of money with respect and discipline is the prerequisite for holding larger amounts of wealth. Reliability over talent. In a marketplace full of erratic talent, consistency, transparency, and dependability win the most lucrative accounts. Total ownership, eliminating excuses and taking absolute responsibility for financial habits turns you into a safe harbor where prosperity can settle. Chapter 10, Learn to hold success without losing yourself. The smile before the lesson. We have all watched a celebrity go from humble, relatable indie darling to wearing sunglasses indoors, speaking exclusively in riddles about their brand, and refusing to eat soup unless it has been certified organic by a Tibetan monk. We assume success changes people by making them evil. But psychology suggests something far funnier: success doesn't change people, it simply removes their filter. If you were a chaotic, insecure mess when you made $50,000, making $5 million just gives you the budget to hire a public relations team to make your chaos look eccentric. The funniest part is watching how frantically we prepare to get rich, while doing zero preparation for how to survive getting rich. We spend all our energy trying to scale our bank accounts, while our egos, our relationships, and our sanity remain entirely unequipped for the altitude. Have you ever noticed how someone who couldn't afford a personal trainer for 30 years suddenly starts lecturing their friends on cellular regeneration the moment they can afford a gym membership? Or how a modest promotion makes people talk about synergy and disruption at family barbecues where people are simply trying to pass the potato salad? True prosperity isn't just about accumulating numbers on a screen. It's about learning how to climb high without losing your head, your humility, or your humanity. The story of the overnight exit and the lost founder. Let me introduce you to David. David spent 4 years building a software startup in his garage, living on instant ramen, coding until his eyes went blurry, and dreaming of the day he would sell his company and never look at a spreadsheet again. The day finally came. A larger tech conglomerate bought David's company for $8 million. For the first 48 hours, David felt like he was floating on a cloud of champagne bubbles. He bought a sports car that required its own weather system, leased a penthouse with a view of the skyline, and started taking private jets to weekend parties in Ibiza. Within 6 months, the high had worn off and reality hit like a freight train. David realized he had spent his entire life tying his self-worth entirely to the pursuit of the exit. Now that the exit had happened, he had no hobbies, no deep friendships that weren't transactional, and no internal compass. He was surrounded by luxury, but he was profoundly, hollowly depressed. He had won the financial game and lost himself in the process. It took 2 years of therapy, selling the sports car, and returning to building things he genuinely cared about before David realized a painful truth: an inflated ego is just a poor person's impression of a rich person. True wealth doesn't require performance, it requires peace. The psychology of lifestyle inflation and ego. Why does success so often trigger a psychological meltdown? Behavioral psychologists call this the identity disruption of achievement. When you climb out of financial struggle, your brain experiences a sudden shift in social standing and safety. If you aren't anchored by core values and self-awareness, the ego rushes in to fill the vacuum with performative luxury. Consider the psychological traps that open up the moment success arrives. Lifestyle inflation, upgrading your car, your clothes, and your home not because you need them, but because you feel an unconscious urge to prove to your past self that you've made it. The comparison trap, moving into wealthier circles and immediately feeling inadequate again, trading your old insecurities for a brand new, six-figure anxiety. The isolation of success. Pulling away from old friends and family because you are secretly terrified they only want something from you, leaving you lonely at the top. As Naval Ravikant famously observed, a fit body, a calm mind, a house full of love. These things cannot be bought, they must be earned. When your net worth outpaces your emotional maturity, money becomes an accelerant for self-sabotage rather than a tool for freedom. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own relationship with achievement. If your income or net worth doubled over the next 12 months, would your ego expand to fill the room, or would your character remain grounded and quiet? The story of the two founders and their second act. Meet two entrepreneurs, Sarah and Jessica, who both sold their digital media agencies for multi-million-dollar payouts in the same year. Sarah let success go straight to her ego. She hired a team of lifestyle consultants, started speaking on stages about her genius, moved into an ultra-exclusive gated community where nobody spoke to each other, and launched 3 new businesses purely out of pride. Within 3 years, burnt out, exhausted, and completely isolated, her new ventures crashed because they were built on ego rather than market demand. Jessica took a completely different approach. The week her payout cleared, Jessica took a 2-week vacation to a quiet cabin with her family, turned off her phone, and reflected on what actually brought her joy. When she returned, Jessica didn't buy a mansion or rent a superyacht. She bought a comfortable, modest home, put 70% of her capital into conservative, income-generating assets, and set up a small foundation supporting local artists, a cause she had cared about since college. Jessica stayed grounded, connected to her community, and peaceful. She held her success lightly, allowing it to serve her life rather than enslave her ego. The shift, grounding your success. If you want to hold wealth without losing your soul, you must anchor your identity outside of your bank account. Separate your worth from your net worth. Remind yourself daily that your value as a human being is not tied to your revenue statement, your title, or your address. Practice radical gratitude. The antidote to ego inflation is deep, active appreciation for where you started and the people who helped you get there. Never look down on the rung of the ladder you just climbed past. Keep your life lean and grounded. Just because you can afford extravagance doesn't mean you must perform it. True luxury is having control over your time and peace in your mind. When you learn to carry success with grace and humility, prosperity stops feeling like a fragile glass house and starts feeling like a solid, peaceful home. The bloom within takeaway. Success without emotional maturity is a heavy mask that eventually crushes the person wearing it. True wealth is holding abundance with open hands and a quiet heart. Chapter Summary. The Identity Disruption. Achieving sudden financial success can destabilize the ego, leading to performative luxury, isolation, and burnout if character isn't prepared. Ego versus true prosperity. Inflated spending and status posturing are often psychological compensation mechanisms masking internal insecurity and lack of purpose. The danger of isolation, surrounding success with ego rather than grounding relationships, creates a lonely existence at the top. Holding success lightly. Grounded founders protect their peace by avoiding lifestyle inflation, preserving core relationships, and investing in meaningful, purpose-driven causes. Anchoring self-worth, separating personal identity from bank statements. Chapter 11, Giving Without Becoming Broke. The smile before the lesson. We have all met someone who treats every charitable request, family loan, and dinner bill split like an audition for secular sainthood. They will volunteer to pay for a table of 12 at a restaurant, hand over hundreds of dollars to a cousin with a foolproof crypto business idea, and buy expensive gifts for acquaintances they met 3 days ago. All while secretly wondering how they are going to cover their own rent when the utility bill arrives on Monday. We love the warm, fuzzy dopamine hit of being seen as generous. There is an intoxicating social thrill in being the person who says, "Don't worry, dinner is on me," with a casual wave of a credit card. The funniest part is watching how quickly that warm glow turns into bitter resentment when the credit card statement arrives and you realize you just funded 3 people's vacations while your own emergency fund is gasping for air. We are often taught that true generosity means setting yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm. But sustainable prosperity requires a completely different math. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you certainly cannot help others build a house if you keep giving away your own hammer. This chapter isn't about becoming a stingy hermit hoarding coins like a dragon in a cave. It's about learning the difference between wise stewardship and people-pleasing, and discovering how to give in a way that builds strength rather than bankruptcy. The story of the perpetual savior and the empty wallet. Let me introduce you to Clara. Clara had a heart of pure gold and a bank account of absolute tragedy. Whenever anyone in her family or friend group hit a financial snag, which happened with impressive regularity, Clara was the first person they called. Did her sister need help with a car payment? Clara sent the cash, dipping into her own savings. Did a colleague need someone to buy 40 boxes of charity cookies? Clara bought 50. Did an acquaintance need a place to crash for just a couple of weeks? Clara let them stay for 6 months without paying rent, even though her own apartment was cramped. Clara felt noble. She felt like a pillar of her community. But beneath the surface, Clara was drowning in silent resentment. The breaking point arrived when Clara's car broke down, requiring an $800 repair to get to work. She reached out to the very people she had bailed out over the years, asking if anyone could spot her a temporary loan. The responses were deafening silence, vague excuses, and dropped calls. Her sister muttered something about being tight on cash right now, and the cousin she had supported vanished into thin air. Clara sat in her broken-down car and wept, not just because her car wouldn't start, but because she realized a brutal truth: she hadn't been practicing generosity, she had been buying affection because she was terrified people wouldn't love her if she wasn't useful to their wallets. The psychology of people-pleasing finance. Why do we confuse generosity with emotional self-abandonment? Behavioral psychologists point to deep-seated approval-seeking behaviors. Many of us carry an internal script that says, "I am only worthy if I am helpful. If I say no to someone asking for money, they will think I am selfish, abandon me, and leave me isolated." Consider how people-pleasing distorts your financial boundaries. You agree to split bills evenly when you only ordered a side salad and water, while your dining companion ordered the Wagyu steak and top-shelf cocktails. You lend money you cannot afford to lose because you are too uncomfortable to utter a simple, polite sentence: "I love you, but I am not in a position to lend money right now." You feel guilty for saving, investing, or spending money on your own peace of mind while people around you are living in self-inflicted financial chaos. As financial author Ramit Sethi frequently emphasizes, true boundaries are not about being cold, they are about being clear. When your giving is driven by guilt or the desire to be liked, you are weaponizing your own bank account against your future. Real stewardship requires boundaries. A healthy tree drops its fruit naturally when it is overflowing, but it doesn't let strangers chop off its branches for firewood. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and examine your own history of giving and lending. When you say yes to financial requests from others, are you acting out of genuine abundance and love, or are you simply paying an emotional tax because you are afraid of saying no? The story of the two philanthropists. Meet two successful business owners, Arthur and Daniel, who both reached a level of financial stability where they wanted to give back to their community. Arthur gave away money like confetti. Whenever someone pitched an idea, a charity gala, or a personal hard luck story, Arthur whipped out his checkbook. He wanted everyone to think of him as a generous benefactor. Within 2 years, Arthur had given away capital he hadn't fully secured, ignored his own tax obligations, and had to scramble to save his own business from a sudden cash crunch. His indiscriminate giving ended up hurting both his business and the people relying on him. Daniel took a systematic, sustainable approach to generosity. Daniel set aside a specific, non-negotiable percentage of his annual business profits into a dedicated, abundance fund designed purely for giving, investing in local mentors, and supporting causes he deeply believed in. Because Daniel's giving was budgeted and anchored in stability, he never had to panic. He could say a joyful, enthusiastic yes to projects that aligned with his values, and a calm, guilt-free no to requests that didn't make sense. Daniel's generosity compounded year after year, building schools and supporting families sustainably, while Arthur burned out in a blaze of financial chaos. The shift, building a sustainable giving engine. If you want to hold wealth while remaining a generous, kind-hearted human being, you must replace emotional people-pleasing with structured stewardship. Build your foundation first. You cannot rescue anyone from a sinking ship if you are standing on a raft made of toothpicks. Secure your own emergency fund, eliminate high-interest debt, and stabilize your financial floor before you start acting as a financial rescue service for others. Designate a giving budget. Decide consciously what percentage of your income you want to allocate to generosity each month. Once that money is gone, your giving bucket for the month is closed. This removes the emotional torture of having to say no on the spot. Practice loving, clear boundaries. Learn to say no without over-explaining or apologizing. A simple, compassionate response, I love you, and I want to support you, but lending money isn't something I do anymore. Protects both your relationship and your bank account. When your generosity is structured, calm, and rooted in abundance rather than guilt, giving stops being a drain on your soul and starts becoming one of the greatest joys of holding wealth. The bloom within takeaway. True generosity is not setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, it is building a warm, permanent hearth that can safely invite others in without burning down your own house. Chapter Summary. The People-Pleasing Trap. Confusing generosity with emotional self-abandonment leads to financial exhaustion and deep-seated resentment. Buying affection, lending money or covering expenses out of guilt is often an unconscious attempt to buy love and secure approval from others. The importance of boundaries. Sustainable prosperity requires clear financial boundaries, separating genuine stewardship from compulsive rescuing. Structured giving. Designating a specific giving budget prevents impulsive financial bleeding and allows for long-term, impactful philanthropy. Protecting the foundation. Securing your own financial floor first ensures that your kindness remains a powerful, steady force rather than a Chapter 12. Think like an investor, live like a builder. The smile before the lesson. We have all met someone who treats the stock market like a high-stakes casino where they are personally destined to outsmart Wall Street algorithms from their smartphone while sitting in traffic. They spend their lunch breaks staring at blinking red and green candlestick charts, treating every microscopic market dip as a personal insult, and talking about leverage with the manic intensity of a pirate searching for buried treasure. We love the theater of high-speed finance. We want our money to perform acrobatic stunts. We want overnight multipliers, thrilling exits, and the cinematic glory of turning a $5 bet into a yacht. The funniest part is watching how quickly those same financial acrobats panic when the market experiences a routine Tuesday afternoon correction. They scream betrayal, sell at the absolute bottom, and retreat to licking their financial wounds while muttering about how the system is rigged. True wealth is never built by people who want to gamble. It is built by people who are willing to build. This chapter isn't about learning how to trade stocks like a caffeinated day trader. It's about adopting the calm, long-term mindset of an investor and pairing it with the patient, hands-on discipline of a master builder. The story of the speculator and the orchard planter. Let me introduce you to two landowners, Julian and Thomas, who inherited adjoining plots of fertile soil on the edge of a growing valley. Julian wanted instant validation. Convinced that waiting for crops to grow was a waste of prime real estate, Julian decided to turn his land into an open-air entertainment venue for high-risk speculative ventures. He spent his days chasing quick trends, tearing up his soil to plant fast-growing weeds that promised massive short-term hype, and betting on every speculative fad that rolled through town. Sometimes Julian made a quick profit, but a single bad frost, a shifting trend, or a dry spell wiped out his gains entirely. He lived in a state of chronic agricultural anxiety, shouting at the clouds and praying for miracles. Thomas had a completely different philosophy. Thomas thought like a builder and an investor. Thomas didn't care about the flashy trends of the season. He walked his land, tested the soil, and decided to plant a mixed orchard of apple and walnut trees. For the first few years, Thomas's land looked deceptively quiet. While Julian was throwing loud parties and chasing transient fads, Thomas was digging irrigation trenches, pruning branches, and adding rich mulch to the dirt. Passers-by laughed at Thomas. "Why are you wasting your time staring at sticks that don't produce a single dollar of fruit?" they asked. Thomas smiled and kept working. He knew that roots take time to anchor before branches can bear weight. 10 years later, a severe frost swept through the valley, wiping out all of Julian's trendy, shallow-rooted ventures overnight. Julian's land was left barren, eroded, and choked in debt. Thomas's orchard, anchored by deep, resilient root systems, weathered the frost with ease. It began producing a massive, reliable harvest of fruit and timber that generated steady, compounding wealth year after year, requiring less labor with every passing season. Julian had spent a decade playing a frantic game of chance. Thomas had spent a decade building an economic fortress. The psychology of immediate versus compound returns. Why do we find the slow, steady path of building so excruciatingly difficult to stick to? Behavioral economists point to our primitive reward circuitry. For our ancestors crossing the savannah, immediate returns meant survival. If you found a bush full of berries, you ate them immediately before someone else did. Modern financial investing requires us to override millions of years of evolutionary wiring. Building a portfolio, growing a business, or mastering a craft requires delaying gratification for years, sometimes decades, before the massive compounding curve finally kicks in. Speculation tricks our brains by offering immediate, erratic dopamine hits. It feels productive because it is noisy, fast, and dramatic. Consider how this plays out in everyday money decisions. You hesitate to put money into a boring, diversified retirement account because you can't touch it tomorrow to buy a new gadget. You are tempted by get-rich-quick schemes because the idea of waiting 5 years feels like an eternity. You abandon a solid, long-term business strategy because a competitor posted a flashy revenue screenshot on social media after 6 months of hype. As legendary investor Charlie Munger famously noted, "The big money is not in the buying and the selling, but in the waiting." When you shift from thinking like a desperate speculator to thinking like an owner, your entire relationship with time changes. You stop looking for shortcuts and start looking for strong foundations. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and examine your approach to building your future. Are your financial moves designed to hit a jackpot this month, or are you quietly planting roots that will feed you and your family for the next 30 years? The story of the two career builders. Meet two graphic designers, Maya and Chloe, who entered the digital marketplace at the same time. Maya treated her career like a slot machine. She bounced from client to client chasing whatever niche was trending on social media that week. Crypto branding 1 month, AI prompt engineering the next, dropshipping aesthetics after that. She made decent spikes of cash, but she had no core portfolio, no recurring retainer clients, and no deep expertise. Every 3 months, she felt like she was starting from zero. Chloe thought like a builder. She picked one core industry, boutique medical practices, and spent 3 years deeply studying their unique marketing problems, building proprietary templates, and establishing a reputation as the most reliable, knowledgeable specialist in that niche. In the beginning, Maya made more money because she chased the hype. But by year 4, Chloe's reputation was an impenetrable moat. Clients sought her out, her retainer list was fully booked, and she could charge triple her original rates because she wasn't just a freelancer, she was an essential asset. Maya was exhausted from running. Chloe was thriving from the building. The shift, adopting the builder's mindset. If you want to stop chasing money and start holding wealth, you must merge the wisdom of the investor with the patience of the builder. Stop trading, start owning, shift your focus from short-term financial acrobatics to long-term asset accumulation, whether through index funds, real estate, digital equity, or valuable business systems. Respect the J-curve. Understand that every worthwhile financial endeavor goes through an invisible gestation period where effort is high and visible returns are zero. Do not panic during the quiet phase, that is when the roots are growing. Build moats, not tents. Focus your energy on creating durable skills, strong relationships, and reliable financial systems that cannot be blown over by the first economic frost that hits the valley. When you think like an investor and live like a builder, wealth stops being something you have to hunt down every single morning. It becomes the natural, inevitable shade of a tree you planted with patience and care. The bloom within takeaway. Speculators look for a lucky break, builders create an unshakable foundation. The most profitable long-term strategy is the one that lets you sleep peacefully while your assets compound in the dark. Chapter Summary. The Speculation Trap. Treating financial decisions like a casino game leads to chronic anxiety, vulnerability to market corrections, and eventual loss. The power of the root system. Sustainable wealth requires deep, resilient foundations that can weather economic frosts, much like a well-planted orchard. Overriding evolution. Overcoming primitive urges for immediate gratification is essential for mastering the delayed compounding curve of true prosperity. Specialization versus hype. Building deep expertise and durable business assets outperforms erratic, trend-chasing hustle over the long horizon. The builder's mindset, shifting focus toward asset accumulation, respecting invisible gestation periods, and creating lasting moats ensures permanent financial security. Chapter 13. Wealth begins in the mind but doesn't stay there. The smile before the lesson. We have all met someone who spends 12 hours a day sitting cross-legged on a designer meditation cushion, visualizing a golden shower of abundance, chanting mantras to the universe, and manifesting wealth with every breath, while their landlord is standing outside knocking on the front door with an eviction notice. We love the romance of pure mindset work. There is something deeply comforting about believing that changing your financial reality requires nothing more than closing your eyes, imagining a pile of cash, and waiting for the universe to slide a briefcase under your front door. The funniest part is watching the look of profound betrayal on people's faces when the universe replies by sending them an electricity bill instead of a check. Inner transformation is vital, but mindset without execution is just daydreaming with good branding. Have you ever noticed how people will read 20 books on wealth consciousness, design elaborate vision boards with superyachts, and write affirmations on bathroom mirrors, yet they still haven't opened a brokerage account, automated their savings, or checked their credit score? Or how we spend months agonizing over our money frequency, while ignoring the fact that we haven't updated our resume, streamlined our business expenses, or learned a single new marketable skill. Wealth begins in the mind, but it refuses to stay there. It eventually demands to be translated into real-world mechanics, disciplined systems, and tangible daily actions. This chapter isn't about abandoning your mental transformation, it's about rolling up your sleeves and bringing your abundance out of the clouds and down into your bank account. The story of the visionary dreamer and the practical builder. Let me introduce you to two aspiring entrepreneurs, Marcus and Julian, who both wanted to build digital consulting businesses in the same year. Marcus was a master of mindset. He attended every manifestation workshop, read every book on abundance blocks, and could talk for hours about quantum frequency, wealth vibrations, and releasing scarcity mindsets. Marcus spent 6 months meditating on his success, buying a domain name, and visualizing his future empire. But Marcus took zero practical action. He hadn't built a website, talked to a single potential client, or figured out how to invoice people. When his savings ran dry, Marcus blamed the universe for having a blocked frequency. Julian understood the mindset too, but Julian knew that thoughts without tools are just daydreams. Julian meditated on his goals for 10 minutes in the morning, and then spent the next 8 hours building a landing page, calling local businesses, refining his service offering, and managing his cash flow with ruthless precision. When Marcus was complaining that the Matrix was rejecting his abundance, Julian had signed his first 5 retainer clients and built a business generating $10,000 a month. Julian didn't lack spiritual alignment. He just understood that mindset is the compass, but execution is the vehicle. You can have the most accurate compass in the world, but if you refuse to turn the ignition key, you aren't going anywhere. The bridge between consciousness and capital. Why do we struggle so much to turn our internal breakthroughs into external results? Behavioral psychologists point to the implementation gap. It is comfortable to live in the realm of potential. In your head, your business idea is a flawless billion-dollar enterprise, your investments are performing brilliantly, and your financial habits are pristine. As long as your ideas stay inside your mind, they are safe from rejection, failure, and messy execution. Executing in the real world requires confronting friction. Setting up automated investments feels bureaucratic and boring compared to visualizing wealth. Having an honest conversation with a client about raising your rates feels terrifying compared to journaling about self-worth. Auditing your monthly expenses feels tedious compared to listening to an inspiring podcast on financial freedom. As the great philosopher Aristotle famously noted, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. You cannot think your way into a rich life if your physical habits are still anchored in avoidance. Mental clarity must be matched by operational courage. The coffee moment. Pause for a moment and look at the gap between your highest financial aspirations and your daily actions. Are you hiding behind endless planning, learning, and visualizing, or are you actually building bridges in the real world today? The story of the two financial journalers. Meet two colleagues, Sarah and Chloe, who both decided to take control of their personal finances after reading the same best-selling book on money psychology. Sarah bought a gorgeous leather-bound journal and spent 3 months writing deep reflections about her childhood money wounds, her scarcity blocks, and her vision for abundance. She felt great emotionally, but she hadn't changed a single practical habit. Her credit card debt remained untouched, her savings account stayed at zero, and her budget was a work of fiction. Chloe did the inner work too, but Chloe immediately translated her realizations into concrete mechanics. The very evening she read the book, Chloe logged into her bank account, canceled 4 unused subscriptions, set up an automatic transfer of $50 to a high-yield savings account every Friday, and scheduled a call with a debt counselor. 6 months later, Sarah was still journaling about her money mindset while drowning in the exact same financial stress. Chloe had eliminated her credit card debt and built a 3-month emergency fund. Chloe didn't just change her mind, she changed her mechanics. The shift, grounding your vision in reality. If you want your inner transformation to show up on your bank statement, you must build a bridge between your thoughts and your actions. Translate insights into checklists. Every time you have an epiphany about money, turn it into an immediate, physical action item. If you realize you are impulsive, set up a 48-hour purchase lockout rule today. Automate the mechanics, take your good intentions and embed them into software, automated bank transfers, and calendar reminders. Do not rely on your daily mood to execute your financial strategy. Embrace the messy execution. Real-world execution is rarely glamorous. It involves math, emails, paperwork, and difficult conversations. Step into the friction with courage, knowing that wealth lives on the other side of action. When your mindset and your mechanics finally speak the same language, prosperity stops being an abstract dream and becomes your tangible, everyday reality. The Bloom Within takeaway. Mindset gives you the vision to see wealth, but execution gives you the keys to hold it. Stop waiting for the universe to hand you a miracle, and start building the bridge with your own 2 hands. Chapter Summary. The trap of pure manifestation, relying solely on visualization and mindset work without taking practical, real-world action leads to stagnation and frustration. The implementation gap. People often hide in the comfortable realm of planning and dreaming to avoid the friction and potential failure of actual execution. Compass versus vehicle. Mental clarity acts as a compass, but disciplined daily mechanics. Chapter 14, The Person Wealth Was Waiting For. The smile before the lesson. We have all reached the final level of a video game, defeated the flashing neon boss, watched the cinematic credits roll across the screen, and then sat back wondering, is that it? Where is the permanent happiness badge? We spend our entire lives treating wealth like a magical finishing line. We convince ourselves that once our net worth hits a specific number, all human friction will instantly cease. We imagine a magical day in the future when anxiety evaporates, problems dissolve into thin air, and we emerge as perfectly enlightened beings wearing cashmere sweaters on a yacht. The funniest part is watching what actually happens when people finally cross that financial finish line without changing who they are. They discover that money is a terrible interior designer. It can upgrade the furniture, but it cannot fix the room. If you were anxious, impatient, and insecure with $50,000 in the bank, having $5 million just gives you a larger stage to run your old psychological reruns. If you couldn't trust yourself when money was tight, having an abundance of capital won't magically make you feel safe, it will just give you more creative ways to worry about losing it. Money is not the destination. It is never the final prize. True prosperity is simply a byproduct. A quiet, reliable consequence of the person you had to become along the way. This chapter isn't about closing the book on your financial journey. It's about realizing that the wealth you were searching for outside of yourself was waiting for you to become its home all along. The story of the traveler and the hidden vault. Let me introduce you to a classic parable about a traveler who spent 40 years searching high and low across the globe for the legendary vault of infinite abundance. He scaled treacherous mountains, crossed scorching deserts, bribed shady merchants in foreign ports, and studied ancient texts in dusty libraries. He was convinced that somewhere out there in the world, hidden behind a secret door, sat a massive pile of gold bearing his name, guarded by destiny. After decades of frantic searching, broke, exhausted, and wearing out his final pair of boots, the traveler stumbled upon a secluded, quiet cabin deep in a green valley. Sitting on the porch was an old sage who looked remarkably peaceful, anchored, and content. The traveler collapsed at the sage's feet, gasping, "Please, tell me the secret. Where is the vault of abundance? I have chased it my entire life, and I have found nothing but empty hands." The sage smiled gently, poured him a cup of warm tea, and said, "You spent your whole life looking for a vault out there in the world, believing that wealth was something you had to hunt down, capture, and lock away." The sage stood up, walked over to the cabin door, and opened it wide. Inside, the home was orderly, warm, filled with books, beautiful art, and tools of craftsmanship. Fresh bread sat on the table, and the room radiated a profound, unshakable peace. "Wealth is not a location," the sage whispered. "It is not a lottery ticket, a lucky break, or a pile of metal hidden in a cave. Wealth is an internal ecosystem. The gold was never waiting for you to find it. The abundance was waiting for you to become the kind of person who could cultivate it, hold it, and share it without losing your soul." The traveler sat in the quiet cabin, took a sip of tea, and finally understood why he had been running so hard for so long. He had been looking for a treasure chest when he should have been building a garden. The psychology of arrival and integration. Why is it so vital to shift our focus from acquisition to identity? Behavioral science and human psychology show that our brains are wired for adaptation. No matter how much money you acquire, your baseline emotional state always catches up to your external circumstances within a few months, a phenomenon known as the hedonic treadmill. If you believe money will solve your self-worth issues, you will be bitterly disappointed. If you believe wealth will cure your chronic impatience or emotional reactivity, the market will quickly teach you otherwise. True wealth requires integration. It requires aligning your nervous system, your daily habits, your integrity, your emotional maturity, and your financial mechanics into a single, cohesive masterpiece of character. As the great psychologist Carl Jung observed, "Who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakes." When you stop treating money as an enemy to be conquered or a savior to be worshipped, something miraculous happens. You stop running. You stop hyperventilating over market dips. You stop performing success for an audience that isn't paying attention. You settle into your own skin. The coffee moment. Pause for one final moment and take a deep breath. Look back across everything you have explored in these pages. If you stopped chasing currency today and focused entirely on becoming a person of unshakable character, stewardship, and peace, what kind of life would naturally grow around you? The story of the two lives completed. Meet two individuals, Elizabeth and Arthur, who reached their 60s after vastly different financial journeys. Elizabeth spent her entire life chasing wealth like a hunter. She obsessed over every cent, hoarded every dollar out of a deep-seated fear of scarcity, treated people transactionally, and built a massive net worth while alienating her family and living in a constant state of internal panic. When she died, she left behind a large bank account, but zero peace, zero legacy of joy, and a trail of emotional wreckage. Arthur spent his life building character. He learned to manage his nervous system, treated every dollar as a tool of stewardship, invested with calm discipline, surrounded himself with grounded peers, and practiced sustainable generosity. By his 60s, Arthur had built a comfortable, resilient fortune. But more importantly, his life was a sanctuary of peace, deep relationships, purpose, and quiet strength. Elizabeth had money. Arthur was wealthy. The money was simply a reflection of the man Arthur had grown into. The shift, becoming the address for prosperity. As we close this audiobook, remember that your financial journey is not a race against scarcity. It is an invitation to personal mastery. Drop the chase, stop running after money as if it were a wild animal escaping your grip. Shift your focus from extracting wealth from the world to creating value through your character. Embody the identity. Every time you make a calm financial choice, honor a commitment, resist an emotional impulse purchase, or invest in your growth, you are casting a vote for the person wealth trusts. Open your hands. Prosperity is not meant to be hoarded out of fear or performed out of ego. It is meant to flow through you as a tool to build freedom, support your family, and serve your purpose with joy. You no longer need to run. The search is over. The person wealth was waiting for is standing right here in the mirror. The bloom within takeaway. Money is attracted to value. Value is created by character. Character is built through daily choices. Become the person, and prosperity will eventually recognize your address. Chapter Summary. The Finish Line Fallacy. Treating wealth as a final destination or a magical cure for internal friction leads to profound disappointment if character remains unaddressed. The internal ecosystem. True prosperity is not a physical location or a hidden vault, it is an internal state of maturity, stewardship, and emotional regulation. Overcoming the hedonic treadmill, external acquisitions always fade into baseline normalcy, proving that lasting peace must come from identity integration rather than accumulation. Character over currency. Hoarding money out of fear leaves behind emotional wreckage, whereas building discipline and integrity creates a true sanctuary of wealth. The ultimate realization. Stopping the frantic chase and focusing on daily growth transforms